As I stood there, coffee beans grinding in the background, I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks before I even stepped into the family gathering. It was one of those summer afternoons where the sun seemed to shine brighter for the wealthy, casting a glowing halo around the opulence of my mother-in-law's estate. I had always been a little out of place, like a single sunflower in a garden of lilies, but today my unease was sharper than ever. "Emily, there you are," my mother-in-law Vivian called out as if I were a long-lost celebrity. She moved elegantly across the marble floor, her expensive designer dress flowing like silk. I managed a smile, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. She always brought a storm with her, and today was no different. The backyard was sprawling, decorated with lavish floral arrangements and a lavish spread of food that would feed a small army. I was used to feeling like an outsider among Vivian's social elite, but today I felt unprepared, as if I were stepping onto a stage with no script. As I made my way through the crowd, I could hear snippets of conversations, laughter spilling over like the champagne in their glasses. Just as I reached Jake, my husband, who was deep in conversation with his relatives, I caught sight of Vivian at the far end of the table. She was regaling her guests with a story about her recent trip to Europe, but her gaze flickered toward me like a hawk spotting its prey. "Look, everyone, the barista has arrived," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with mock enthusiasm. A ripple of laughter followed, and I could feel my heart drop into my stomach. The air shifted, the laughter felt cold and venomous. I stood frozen, a mask of confusion plastered across my face, while the punchline hit harder than I could have anticipated. "Maybe she can whip us up some lattes," Vivian continued, her tone sugary sweet but laced with disdain. I could feel the blood rushing to my ears, drowning out the laughter that followed. I took a deep breath, attempting to summon a rebuttal, but all that came out was silence. The warmth of the sun felt oppressive against my skin, as if it were mocking me too. Across the table, I noticed a few of Jake's cousins exchanging amused glances. They were the golden children, a perfect mix of privilege and confidence. I felt the weight of my modest job suffocating me, the role of a barista, one I had poured my heart into, suddenly feeling like a badge of shame. My hands trembled slightly as I fiddled with the hem of my shirt, wishing I could disappear. Jake, unaware of the storm brewing around me, smiled at his mother, oblivious to how much her words had cut. I felt a familiar pang of resentment. He never soothed my worries or acknowledged the way his family treated me. It was as if I were invisible when it came to defending my worth in a room full of disapproving gazes. "Why do you let her get to you?" Jake had asked me the night before, dismissing my concerns with a wave of his hand. I had felt so small then, surrounded by the layers of wealth and privilege that defined his family. "You know she's just joking?" But deep down, I felt it wasn't just a joke. It was a reminder of where I stood in their eyes. The gathering continued, and I forced myself to smile while I watched Vivian bask in her glory, a queen reigning over her kingdom. I felt the rift between us widening, my sense of inadequacy gnawing at my sense of self. What was worse than feeling humiliated was the realization that this wasn't just a one-time occurrence. It was a cycle of belittling remarks and dismissive glances I had grown accustomed to. As the hours dragged on, I noticed Vivian sniping at anyone who stepped out of line, correcting their manners with a smile that could slice through glass. It was her method of asserting dominance, and I could feel her gaze land on me whenever I wasn't around. What was it about me that deserved such scrutiny? I couldn't help but wonder if my mere existence was a blight on her perfect family portrait. Finally, the afternoon began to wind down. Jake's cousins mingled and shared stories of their latest vacations, their wealth painting a canvas I felt excluded from. I felt like an imposter among these people, desperately trying to fit in while they effortlessly leaned into their superiority. As I returned to Jake's side, my facade was cracking, and I couldn't hold back the simmering resentment any longer. "I can't believe your mother did that," I whispered, feigning a casual tone. "It's embarrassing." But Jake merely shrugged, brushing it off like it was a minor inconvenience. "She's just being her. Don't take it to heart, Emily." His words stung, pushing me further into my shell. It was as if every time I opened up about my feelings, he would shut me down again, trying to maintain peace at the expense of my dignity. At that moment, I realized something had to change. I wasn't going to let Vivian's disdain define me anymore. The laughter of the guests still echoed in my ears, but I began to feel a fire igniting within me. This humiliation wouldn't be the end of my story, it was merely the beginning. I was determined to rise above the belittlement, to reclaim my identity from the shadows cast by my wealthy in-laws. If you've ever been underestimated by family, you'll understand every part of what happened next. The seed of change was planted in my heart as I ventured into the night, the low hum of quiet contemplation melding with the fading echoes of laughter. The next chapter of my life was about to unfold, and I was ready to embrace the challenge. As I stood there, the laughter of the guests echoing in my ears like the ominous toll of a bell, I felt a simmering frustration boiling within me. I looked around at Vivian's elite friends, their polished exteriors reflecting a world I had always felt excluded from. My gaze drifted to the lavish buffet display, but I no longer felt hungry. Instead, I felt a gnawing emptiness that seemed to widen with every mocking glance. "Did you hear about Chloe's recent promotion?" I overheard one of Vivian's friends whisper, her tone dripping with admiration. "What a remarkable young woman, she's already managing a team at the firm." The words struck me like a hammer. Chloe, Vivian's golden child, was a paragon of success. Naturally, she was the one who received praise while I stood in the shadows, a mere footnote in the family saga. I couldn't help but recall the way Vivian had launched into a story about Chloe's accolades earlier. "Emily, dear, you really should take notes. It seems Chloe is always one step ahead," she had remarked, her voice laced with false sweetness. The comment stung more than I cared to admit. I was tired of being compared to a standard I could never meet. I had always cherished my role as a barista, a job that allowed me to engage with people and share moments of joy over a cup of coffee. But here, in this environment, it felt like a mark of shame, a label that made me less worthy in their eyes. The afternoon wore on, and as I wandered to the edge of the garden, the sun began to dip, casting long shadows that felt strangely comforting. I found solace in a small alcove, surrounded by vibrant flowers that seemed to bloom defiantly against the backdrop of the opulence around me. It was here that I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to think. I closed my eyes and drifted into my own world, away from the laughter and the glances that pierced through my defenses. In that moment of quiet, a realization began to take shape. I thought of the side business I had started quietly, a small but profitable endeavor that I had kept hidden from my in-laws. It had begun as a way to support my coffee habit, selling custom coffee blends online. I had poured my heart into creating unique flavors, crafting artisanal blends that reflected my personality. I had never shared this with anyone, not even Jake. There was a part of me that feared their judgment, their laughter turning to scorn if they found out I was selling coffee rather than climbing the corporate ladder. But now, standing in my secret garden of blooms and thoughts, I felt a flicker of pride in that hidden venture. It wasn't just a side gig, it was a piece of my identity, a manifestation of my passion and creativity. I could see it in my mind's eye, the bright packaging, the vibrant website, the positive reviews from customers who appreciated the care and thought I put into each blend. Maybe, just maybe, this was my way of asserting myself without confrontation. As I reflected on this newfound realization, a sense of empowerment washed over me. I was not just a barista. I was an entrepreneur in my own right, crafting something meaningful. I began to consider how I could expand this into a full-fledged business, a venture that could stand on its own merit beyond the shadow of Vivian's wealth and Chloe's accolades. The more I thought about it, the more I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. I could carve out my own space in this world, one that belonged to me. With this newfound clarity, I felt a surge of determination. I would no longer allow Vivian's mocking comments or Chloe's success to define my worth. I would harness this hidden potential, turning my passion for coffee into something that could not only provide for me but also serve as a testament to my capabilities. I could no longer accept being the butt of their jokes. I had to reclaim my narrative. The gathering began to wind down, and I could see guests slowly filtering out, their laughter fading into the evening air. As I stepped back into the main area, I caught sight of Vivian. She was basking in the glow of attention, recounting yet another story, this time about one of her extravagant vacations. The way she commanded the room with her presence made me feel small again, but I held on to the vision of my coffee blends, a reminder of my strength. Jake approached, and I could see the concern etched on his face. "You okay, Em? You were gone for a while?" There was genuine care in his voice, but I could sense the underlying expectation for me to brush off the day's events as mere folly. "I'm fine," I replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Just needed a moment." "Let's get out of here soon," he suggested, oblivious to the storm that had been brewing inside me. I'm not a fan of these gatherings either. As we gathered our things, I felt a resolve settle within me. I would take my side business seriously. I would not only prove to Vivian and her friends that I was more than they believed, but I would also show myself that I was capable of so much more than their laughter ever hinted at. Walking to the car, I stole a glance at Vivian's retreating figure, feeling a fire ignite in my chest. The time for change was upon me, and I was ready to embrace it. No longer would I be the sunflower struggling to survive in a garden of lilies. I would bloom in my own right, vibrant and unapologetic. Little did I know, this was merely the beginning of my journey toward asserting my true self, a journey that would ultimately lead to a confrontation with the very family that had underestimated me for far too long. As the last of the guests trickled out, I felt an electric charge in the air, a tension swirling around me like a storm waiting to break. I stood at the edge of the garden, the evening air cool against my skin, my heart racing with a blend of anger and excitement. I had spent too long standing in the shadows, but now a fierce resolve began to take shape within me. I wasn't just a barista anymore, I was an entrepreneur with a burgeoning business that could challenge the status quo. A few days passed, and I couldn't shake the thought of the dinner and the way Vivian had belittled me in front of everyone. I replayed her smirk, her cutting comments, and the laughter that followed each jab she threw my way. It was infuriating, but I realized that her words, meant to diminish me, had ignited a spark instead. I was determined to take control of my narrative and assert my worth, both in my personal life and in the family dynamic. It was during one of my late-night work sessions, when I was busy crafting a new coffee blend, that I stumbled upon an article about Vivian's company. My fingers froze over the keyboard as I read through the headlines detailing the financial struggles her well-established firm was facing. An emergency loan was on the horizon and investors were hesitant. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. This was my chance to turn the tide. I spent the next few days gathering information, piecing together a strategy in my mind. My small business, which had been my secret for so long, suddenly appeared to me as a powerful tool. If Vivian's company was in dire straits, perhaps I could not only save them but also prove my worth. I envisioned a scenario where I could leverage my success to earn respect, an opportunity to confront her not just as her daughter-in-law but as a businesswoman capable of making waves. With each passing day, my self-confidence surged. I reached out to suppliers, negotiated better rates, and crafted a marketing plan that could elevate my brand. I even started building a presence on social media, sharing my journey and the unique flavors I was creating. For the first time, I felt like I was stepping into my own light, ready to face whatever came next. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the dinner invitation from Vivian. The email was curt, a simple request for our family to gather for a small celebration of Chloe's latest achievement. As I read it, a part of me felt a flicker of dread, but the other part was emboldened by the knowledge that I had something she needed. I accepted the invitation, my mind racing with possibilities. The night of the dinner arrived, and I could sense the charged atmosphere as soon as I stepped into the opulent dining room. Vivian was already regaling the guests with tales of Chloe's success, her voice booming, basking in the warmth of their admiration. I was determined to keep my composure, but the sting of humiliation from past gatherings lingered in the back of my mind. As the evening progressed, I could see the glimmer of unease in Vivian's eyes, a flicker that revealed her underlying stress about her company's struggles. It was subtle but palpable, and I knew this was my moment. As dessert was served, I took a deep breath and steeled myself. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, and now it was time to confront her. "Vivian," I began, my voice steady despite the tension in the room. "I wanted to talk to you about your company." The chatter around us faded as all eyes turned toward me, curiosity piqued. She raised an eyebrow, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness. "What about it?" I continued. "I've been following the news regarding the financial difficulties. I know how hard it must be for you." I paused, gauging her reaction. "And I want to help." A wave of disbelief washed over her features, followed by a hint of disdain. And how would you do that? Your little coffee venture is hardly the solution to this problem. But instead of backing down, I pressed on. You'd be surprised at how well it's doing. I've built a customer base that appreciates quality. I think we could collaborate. My brand and your expertise could create something exceptional. My heart raced as I proposed the idea, knowing how bold it was to suggest a partnership. The room fell silent, and I could see the gears turning in Vivian's mind. I was challenging her, standing up for myself in a way I never had before. For a moment, I felt a rush of exhilaration. I was no longer the quiet, embarrassed daughter-in-law. I was a woman with vision and ambition, ready to take my rightful place. Vivian's composure faltered as she processed my proposal. You want to invest in my company. You're not serious, she scoffed, but her tone was more defensive than dismissive. I could sense that my words had struck a nerve. I am serious, I replied, my voice firm. I may not have the corporate background you're used to, but I know how to build a brand. If we combine our strengths, we could turn things around. As I spoke, I noticed a flicker of something in her eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or maybe a hint of respect. The crowd watched in silence, captivated by the unfolding drama. I could feel the tide starting to shift, the power dynamics rearranging in this room filled with the elite. The tension was palpable as Vivian continued to scrutinize me, searching for cracks in my resolve. What makes you think I'd ever consider such a thing? She asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. Because, I replied, my heart pounding, I'm not just Emily the barista anymore. I'm Emily the entrepreneur, and I have something valuable to offer. We could create a partnership that would benefit both of us. Just consider it. The silence hung heavy in the air, and I could see her weighing her options. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for me but for her, too. I had stepped into my power, and she could no longer ignore me. As the evening wore on, I felt a palpable shift. I was no longer the marginalized member of the family, the punchline to their jokes. I had confronted the very person who had belittled me, and in doing so, I had carved out a space for myself. I could sense the wheels of change turning, and I knew this was just the beginning. My heart raced with the prospect of what lay ahead. I was ready to reclaim my dignity and assert my worth, and I could almost taste the victory that awaited me. The family dynamics were about to shift, and I was determined to be at the forefront of that change. As I stood in front of Vivian, the room buzzed with a tense anticipation. Her disbelief was palpable, and I could feel the weight of her judgment pressing down on me. But I was no longer the timid daughter-in-law who shrank under her scrutiny. I was ready to claim my space. Your company is facing serious issues, Vivian, I pressed on, my voice steady. I know the stakes. If you're willing to listen, I might have a solution. The murmurs around the table grew louder as the guests shifted in their seats, intrigued by this unexpected confrontation. Vivian's eyes narrowed, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. And what exactly makes you think you can help? Your little coffee shop is just a hobby, she shot back, her tone dripping with condescension. I smiled, knowing that this was the moment to reveal my ace. Actually, it's much more than that. My coffee venture has been thriving. I've developed a brand that's gaining traction, and I've been quietly building my assets. I could feel a rush of adrenaline as I spoke, each word empowering me further. I'm not just a barista anymore. I'm a businesswoman, and I'm willing to offer an emergency loan to help your company weather this storm. The room fell silent. I could see the disbelief etched on the faces of the guests, and for a moment I reveled in the shock that rippled through the crowd. Vivian's expression shifted from disdain to a flicker of vulnerability. You're serious? She finally asked, the sharpness in her voice replaced by a hint of uncertainty. Dead serious, I replied, my heart racing. I understand you're in a tough spot and I can help, but this isn't just about money, it's about respect. I want you to see me as an equal, not just your daughter-in-law. Vivian's facade of confidence began to crack, and I could almost hear the gears of her mind grinding as she processed this new information. I pressed on, knowing I had to capitalize on this moment. You've underestimated me for too long, Vivian. I've been quietly supporting your family while building my own empire. I hold significant shares in your company, and I've been financing parts of your lifestyle without you even knowing. Gasps filled the room, and I could see the realization dawning on the faces of the other guests. Vivian's mouth opened slightly as if she was trying to form words but couldn't quite find them. You can't be serious, she stammered. Oh, but I am, I continued, feeling the power shift in my favor. Your company's financial struggles are a direct result of the decisions made by you and your team. But instead of letting it all fall apart, I want to step in and help. I want to turn this around, not just for your sake, but for my own. I deserve to be recognized for what I've built, and I won't allow you to belittle me anymore. The tension in the room was electric, a charged atmosphere filled with disbelief and intrigue. I could see Jake, my husband, glancing between us, his expression a mix of pride and shock. He had always known my potential, but to see me standing up to his mother like this was a turning point. Finally, Vivian regained some composure, though it was clear she was struggling. You think you can just waltz in here and take control? This is a family business, she exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. It's a business you have mismanaged, I countered, my tone unwavering. And it's a family that I've been a part of, whether you've acknowledged it or not. I'm ready to help, but it's on my terms. You can either accept my offer and work together, or watch everything you've built crumble. The room held its breath, and I could see the gears turning in Vivian's mind. She weighed her options, the realization dawning on her that she needed me more than she wanted to admit. What are your terms? She finally asked, her voice low. I felt a surge of triumph. First, I want a seat at the table. I want to be part of the decision-making process. Second, I need transparency in all financial dealings. This is a partnership, not a handout. And finally, I want you to acknowledge my contributions to the family. I won't be sidelined any longer. As the words left my mouth, I could see a flicker of respect in her eyes. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I turned the tables. If we can agree on these terms, I will help you secure the loan needed to stabilize your company, I concluded. The silence hung heavy in the air, each second stretching out as Vivian weighed her options. Finally, she nodded slowly, the fight in her eyes replaced by a reluctant acceptance. Fine. Let's talk business. The tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of possibility. I had done it. I had not only stood up to Vivian, but had also carved out a space for myself within the family. The guests began to murmur amongst themselves, processing the dramatic turn of events. As the evening wore on and the conversation shifted, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I had faced my demons head-on, and in doing so, I had transformed my relationship with my in-laws. No longer would I be the overlooked daughter-in-law. I had stepped into my power as a successful entrepreneur. In the days that followed, the dynamics within the family began to shift. I found myself not just included but valued. Vivian and I began to work together, and I realized that our relationship had the potential to evolve into one of mutual respect and collaboration. Reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment, I felt a swell of pride. I had not only proven my worth to Vivian but had also learned to embrace my own identity. I understood now that true wealth was not just about financial success, but about self-worth and the relationships we foster. As I looked at my thriving business and the newfound respect from my family, I felt grateful. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to navigate it on my own terms. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more stories where the underdog finally gets the justice they deserve.